Hey everybody, I'm Ben, and just recently I made one of these wooden mallets for the first time, completely out of scrap wood, and it ended up being so much fun that I went ahead and made another one, but this time I took a video of it and I'm going to go ahead and show you how to make it. Enjoy! So I started off here by squaring off some scrap wood that I had, and then cutting it down to about 3 inches in width. I have two pieces here. The longer one is actually going to be my outside, and the smaller one is going to be the inside of the mallet. I took the outside pieces and cut them down to about 6 inches each. Next, I wanted to square up where I'm going to be drilling my 2-inch holes that are going to hold the weights inside the mallet. And all I used here was just kind of a 2-inch bit, which wasn't the greatest idea. You'll see here in a minute that I actually ended up clogging up the teeth with wood, and I had to keep cleaning that out every once in a while. You can use a Forstner bit or really any other bit. It doesn't even have to be 2 inches. It can really be just whatever you have lying around. Just make sure to match up your measurements with the rest of your mallet so you know how big those holes are going to be. Now each hole that I have here, this piece of wood is a little bit longer than I need, but that's just so I can clamp it down. Now that I've got those 2 holes, I'm going to go ahead and cut them down to a little bit smaller size. Also, I line this up at about a 2-degree angle that I'm going to cut each one off at. And that's so that I have a nice shallow wedge there that's going to hold my handle in place in the middle of the mallet. So I went ahead and glued everything together. I'm just going to glue these bottom 2 parts together at first. But what you'll see here in a moment is I'm still going to clamp the top piece on, but I'm not going to glue it yet. That's just so I have even pressure all around. Once that's glued up, I take everything apart, and now I'm going to put in the weights, which are actually just some BB pellets that I got for about $4 or $5. You can use sand or lead or anything like that. Once that's done, I went ahead and glued in the top. After everything was glued up, I ran through the table saw again, only taking off about 1/8 of an inch. This was just to square off all my uneven edges. At this point, you can actually stop if you want to. You've got a nice square mallet, and it's definitely heavy enough that you just want to attach it to the handle. But if you want it to look a little bit nicer, you can do some different things to definitely fancy it up. So what I did here is I set my table saw at a 15-degree angle, and I ran it through at about a 1/2 inch depth 4 times. Once that was done, I wanted to move on to the handle, so I took some more scrap wood that I had and I cut it in half, but it ended up being about an inch wide. And this one was about 20 or so inches in length, and I glued the 2 together because I wanted a little bit thicker handle than the last time I made one. While I was waiting for that to set, I went ahead and took a look at my completed mallet head. Now the bottom is going to be a little bit wider than the top, so see here that one's about 1 inch in length, and the other side is about 1/8 less, so I know that's my top. Now that my handle is done gluing up, I'm going to do the same thing and kind of cut off some of the edges just to round it out. So I set my table saw at 45 degrees and ran it through, again about 1/4 inch, and ran it through 4 times. And then after that, I just squared off the edges. Now as you can see, I've got a nice kind of octagonal shape here, but I'm actually going to smooth that out later with my sander. And then in just a moment here, we're going to figure out how to combine these 2. In the meantime, just to get a nice smooth surface here, I went ahead and took a hand plane and smoothed this out. Now I set up a little jig here, and what I ended up doing was slowly starting to take off some material on the sides of the handle. And I also have the mallet head there that I'm test fitting it into, so I'm only taking off a little bit at a time. And I only did this about an inch into the handle until I got a nice tight fit in there. And then I went back and did the depth of the entire mallet head, which was about 3 inches. I also cut a slit in the middle here, and that is going to be for the wedge that's going to fit in here in just a moment. So this is the scrap piece of wood that I had from earlier that's going to fit down in there as a wedge. And I just cut it down to width so it's going to fit in there like that. Put everything together as a test fit, and then I went ahead and applied some glue just to make sure everything is nice and tight, and I hammered the wedge in there. Now I ended up breaking off part of the wedge, but that was fine. I hammered in the rest, and once it was all dried out, again, you can just be done there, but I went ahead and took a handsaw and squared everything off. Once that was done, I took my sanders and basically smoothed off all the edges. I rounded out the handle so it wasn't so squared off, and then I also rounded off all the edges on the head of the mallet. Now what I actually wanted to do here was stain this mallet, and so I'd have one unstained, one stained, just to give it a little bit of a nicer look. Unfortunately, I hadn't opened up this stain in a while, so it kind of popped open and spilled everywhere, but it happens. That's why it's important to have a paint can opener instead of just any old wedge that you have lying around. Alright, hopefully you enjoyed that video as much as I enjoyed making this and making a big mess. But in all honesty, it only takes about a day to make, and it looks really good and it's fun to use. And so it's one of those things that it'll just get you inspired to keep making more stuff and really just get creative with it too. You know, if you don't have a router, or if you think everything always comes out square, you know, try and round things off like that. It actually comes out a lot better than you expect. And it's one of those cool things that just adds a nice little personal touch to it as well. If you like this video, definitely check out some of my other videos and feel free to subscribe. And that's it. Thank you very much.